You know, there's something oddly comforting about how fast this administration reaches certainty. 2 hours after a fatal shooting, boom, motive identified, intent confirmed, moral verdict delivered. Investigations are messy, but vibes are immediate.
You've also been criticized for your comments. The shooting, we should note, was Wednesday at 10:37 a.m. Eastern. Just over 2 hours later, the Department of Homeland Security put out a statement definitively asserting what had happened, defending the ICE agent, accusing Renee Good of domestic terrorism. That's a characterization that you reiterated in a press conference half an hour later. Now, Republican Senator Thom Tillis said, quote, "It was very unusual to have a senior law enforcement official to draw a conclusion about an event where the scene was still being processed. Generally speaking, law enforcement would recognize that a life was lost, that families are changed forever, the shooter's life will change forever. We're collecting video, we're trying to assess the situation." Why did you not wait for an investigation before making your comments?
Earlier this week, ICE agents shot and killed a woman in Minneapolis. Within hours, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem labeled her a domestic terrorist. No completed investigation, no official findings, just confidence. The kind of confidence usually reserved for people who haven't been contradicted yet. Even Republican Senator Thom Tillis called it very unusual to draw conclusions while the scene was still being processed. Translation: maybe don't declare the ending before the opening credits finish.
Do you have any comments on what's happening with the shooting in Minneapolis? You did mention it earlier. I was wondering, out of the 2,000 deployed there, are they including the newly hired ICE agents, or are diversions still happening from FBI, Border Patrol, DEA, and HSI?
So a couple of questions there. You asked about a shooting that we just had in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was an act of domestic terrorism. What happened was our ICE officers were out in an enforcement action. They got stuck in the snow because of the adverse weather that is in Minneapolis. They were attempting to push out their vehicle, and a woman attacked them and those surrounding them and attempted to run them over and ram them with her vehicle. An officer of ours acted quickly and defensively shot to protect himself and the people around him. And my understanding is that she was hit and is deceased. We're continuing to gather more information, but this goes to show the assaults that our ICE officers and our law enforcement are under every single day. These vehicle rammings are domestic acts of terrorism. We're working with the Department of Justice to prosecute them as such. We will continue to protect our ICE officers and in cooperation with other law enforcement agencies as well. You've seen me in the last couple of days deploy over 2,000 more officers to the Minneapolis area. And in the last 2 days, we've arrested hundreds and hundreds of dangerous criminals. Not just fraudsters who stole from the American people billions of dollars and put it in their pockets and enriched their friends from overseas and themselves, but also individuals who committed acts of murder and rape and trafficking and drug exploitation and child exploitation. So we're going to continue to do our work. And I want to remind everybody that the act like we saw today of using a vehicle to try to kill an officer and his colleagues and the other people around him is something that every politician, every elected official, everyone in this country should be able to rally around and say that it is wrong. And that sanctuary cities and sanctuary states that protect individuals who do that should no longer be allowed. That those individuals that are in leadership positions in these sanctuary jurisdictions need to work with us to make sure that every single person that's out there enforcing the law can be safe, but also so that all of our citizens can continue to be safe too. Domestic acts of terrorism like this will not stand, and I'm grateful that we have the leadership in Washington, D.C. that recognizes it, and will make sure that it's working to keep every single community safe, regardless of who's in charge in that city. President Trump gets up every day and will work to keep people safe, whether they're in a red state or a blue state or in a city that has a Republican mayor or a mayor that has a Democrat mayor. He's going to fight for every single American to make sure they live in a safe community and can raise their kids without fear. I want to reiterate first with all of you the facts of what happened today. At 10:25 a.m. Central Time, Immigration and Customs Enforcement were carrying out lawful operations here in Minneapolis. Because of the adverse weather that Minneapolis has seen in recent snow, one of the vehicles became stuck and ensnared in the snow. Law enforcement were attempting to push out this vehicle, and when a mob of agitators that were harassing them all day began blocking them in, shouting at them, and impeding law enforcement operations. ICE officers and agents approached the vehicle of the individual in question, who was blocking the officers in with her vehicle, and she had been stalking and impeding their work all throughout the day. ICE agents repeatedly ordered her to get out of the car and to stop obstructing law enforcement, but she refused to obey their commands. She then proceeded to weaponize her vehicle, and she attempted to run a law enforcement officer over. This appears as an attempt to kill or to cause bodily harm to agents, an act of domestic terrorism. The ICE officer, fearing for his life and the other officers around him and the safety of the public, fired defensive shots. He used his training to save his own life and that of his colleagues. He was treated at a local hospital, has been released, and is now with family. I encourage the American people at this point in time to pray for him, but also to pray for the deceased's family and her loved ones. Today alone, in this country, there have been 4 different domestic terrorist attacks on federal officers by the ramming of vehicles. 3 of them happened here in Minneapolis.
When pressed on why she didn't wait, Noem explained that everything she said was factual and the truth. She had spoken to officers. She had seen video. She had context we didn't. Which brings us to one of the most liked viewer reactions online. One commenter quoted George Orwell. "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. And look, if your audience is breaking out Orwell quotes unprompted, that's usually not a great sign for the messaging team." Noem initially described ICE officers stuck in snow, pushing a vehicle, when a woman attacked them and attempted to ram them. Jake Tapper, representing the radical position of watching the video, pushed back, because the footage shows something different. Not snow pushing, not an ambush, just a tense, chaotic confrontation with an unclear intent. And that's where things get interesting, because Tapper keeps asking the same boring, responsible question. How do you know what her intent was? And Noem keeps giving the same confident answer. The vehicle was weaponized. Therefore, domestic terrorism, which led one viewer to respond. She says she knew the facts because she was there the day before. What? And honestly, fair question. Because unless time travel is part of DHS training now, being near Minneapolis yesterday is not usually considered eyewitness testimony. What really unsettles people isn't just the conclusion, it's how effortlessly it's delivered. One commenter put it bluntly. The gall to blatantly and unflinchingly lie on TV. This is terrifying. Another wrote, they lie with confidence, shamelessly asking us not to believe our own eyes. And that's the pattern. Certainty replaces evidence. Volume replaces verification. And skepticism itself starts to sound suspicious. Noem insists there is no ambiguity. None. Zero. Which is impressive, because ambiguity is usually what investigations are for. At this point, domestic terrorism becomes less of a legal definition and more of a rhetorical superpower. Once applied, it ends debate. Questions feel disloyal. Doubt feels dangerous. And viewers notice that too. The tone, the framing, the refusal to even acknowledge uncertainty. One person summed it up with less policy language and more raw emotion. This is sickening. Another, what a horrible, horrible, horrible human being. Now, is that polite discourse? No. But it is predictable discourse when people feel gaslit by authority figures insisting reality is settled while the evidence is still loading. As the interview goes on, the story widens. Suddenly, it's not about one shooting. It's about protesters, activists, crime, kill ICE chants, national security, America being safe again, which is always a tell. Because when a single incident can't fully carry the argument, it gets backed up by a parade of fears. The specific dissolves into the symbolic, and anyone asking questions gets lumped in with the opposition. Or as one viewer sarcastically implied, when facts get inconvenient, maybe Botox and fillers aren't the only things stretched a little too far. Here's the irony. This administration says it believes in transparency, but what it really believes in is certainty without patience. And when the government asks you to ignore what you see, trust what you're told, and accept conclusions before investigations, people notice. They quote Orwell. They get angry. They get scared. Because transparency doesn't mean speaking first. Truth doesn't mean speaking loudest. And justice doesn't mean announcing the verdict while the evidence is still buffering. That's not clarity. That's confidence trying to outrun reality.
Facts of the situation are that the vehicle was weaponized and it attacked the law enforcement officer. He defended himself and he defended those individuals around him. That is the definition. When there is something that is weaponized to use against the public and law enforcement, that is an act of domestic terrorism. It happened in our shores. It happened here in our country. You don't get to change the facts just because you don't like them. We will continue to look at this individual and what her motivations were. We know that there was, throughout that morning, she had harassed and impeded law enforcement operations. That raises the suspicion level with all of these law enforcement officers as far as paying attention to what her capacity is. And as you see on the videos, and they've proven out, that this law enforcement officer took the action that his training prepared him for, and he worked to make sure that he could save his own life and those around him.